In the late summer of 1944, deep inside a forested ridge system carved with ravines and crisscrossed by enemy patrol lines, a young American sniper found himself assigned an impossible task. Identify a hidden kill zone without climbing a tree, firing a shot, or exposing a single inch of his silhouette. It was an area where every approach trail had been mined, every line of sight was trapped by interlocking machine gun nests, and every sound, no matter how small, was swallowed by thick, humid undergrowth. The ridge had already claimed multiple reconnaissance teams, leaving the battalion blind and boxed in by an enemy who knew the land better than anyone else. Command needed the layout. They needed the angles. They needed the pattern of fire. But no scout could get close enough to observe it. That was when the sniper proposed something no one expected. He claimed he could read the kill zone, using nothing more than a metal fork, a small length of wire, and a handful of stinging nettles he had plucked along the trail. The idea was so strange that officers dismissed it as a joke, until he explained that the ridge, captured after weeks of rain and artillery shock waves, had become a giant resonant chamber. Every movement, every vibration, every boot on the other side of the forest floor sent faint tremors through the roots, stones, and fractured earth. If those vibrations could be translated, even crudely, he said, then the kill zone's layout could be reconstructed without ever seeing it. It sounded insane. But it was the only idea that didn't involve more dead scouts. What began as a desperate gamble soon turned into one of the strangest intelligence feats of the war. The sniper's improvised Fork-and-Nettle vibration hack, mocked at first as nonsense, would map out a hidden corridor of death with such accuracy that it changed the battalion's entire attack plan. And it was done in total silence, deep within the forest, under a fog so thick that even the trees appeared to drift. This is the story of how one man turned a patch of nettles and a mess kit utensil into a field sensor that saved hundreds of lives. Night settled over the ridge like a heavy, wet blanket, muffling even the sound of distant artillery. The sniper crawled into a shallow fold in the terrain, far enough from enemy lines to avoid being spotted, but close enough to feel the ground hum beneath him. He tested the soil with the back of his hand, searching for micro-tremors. Every few seconds, a faint pulse, barely perceptible, ran through the mud. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic. The pattern suggested boots, equipment shifts, and something heavier that scraped or rotated at measured intervals. The kill zone was alive with preparation. The sniper unpacked the bizarre kit he had assembled, an ordinary field fork, a piece of thin signal wire, and a bundle of nettles wrapped around the shaft. The nettles responded to vibrations far more sensitively than dry twigs, and when the fork's tines were planted into the ground, those vibrations traveled upward, causing the nettle fibers to twitch. He watched the movement under a sliver of moonlight, tracking every subtle shift as if reading letters on a page. Each twitch revealed direction. Each pause hinted at distance. The ridge had become his map. An hour passed as he charted the invisible world around him. The nettles trembled sharply whenever enemy boots crossed a specific rocky shelf, sending a distinct pulse through the fork. This meant a trail, one of several. Other vibrations were deeper, more resonant, as if metal was rotating in place. That, he guessed, was a mounted gun adjusting its arc of fire. Slowly, piece by piece, the kill zone took shape in his mind like a sketch emerging from darkness. By dawn, he had identified the first two machine gun nests. Their arcs overlapped, forming a funnel that would catch any squad moving along the lower trail. But he needed more. He retreated into a thicket where the ground was softer and more responsive, and planted the fork again. This time the vibrations came from deeper within the ridge, quieter, steadier, as though concealed by earthworks. These signatures were crucial. They indicated entrenched positions. He cross-referenced each signal with natural markers, rock shelves, fallen logs, and drainage channels. The rhythm of enemy footsteps on stone was sharper than on soil. The thump of sandbags being shifted produced a muted drag through the fork's tines. The sniper recorded all of it in a small, dirt-smudged notebook, sketching rough angles and impact lines with increasing certainty. His strange contraption, dismissed hours earlier as a trick, was now behaving like a primitive seismograph. What alarmed him most was a deep, periodic tremor that didn't match any pattern of movement. It pulsed every few minutes, slow, deliberate, heavy. He realized it wasn't footsteps, it was recoil. A mortar tube, positioned somewhere near the western face of the ridge, was being test-fired into a pit to mask the sound. If that weapon remained unseen, it would cut down any attempt to flank the kill zone. He tightened his grip on the fork. The stakes had just changed. The sniper remained completely motionless for what felt like hours, letting the ridge speak through the nettles. He could now distinguish at least 6 firing lanes, 3 machine gun pits, 1 mortar position, and multiple patrol patterns. But he needed exact orientation. One mistake, one inaccurate assumption could doom an entire battalion. He repositioned to a patch of exposed shale where vibrations traveled with clarity. He planted the fork, aligned the nettles, and waited. This time, when the enemy rotated a machine gun, the tremor spread across the ridge in a perfect arc. The sniper traced it with his eyes, mapping the curve precisely. That curve revealed the gun's maximum field of fire. He repeated the process for each nest, verifying overlaps and blind spots. By midday, he had produced a rough, yet shockingly accurate diagram of the kill zone. It showed a deadly funnel, a false safe corridor, and a concealed crossfire trap designed to annihilate any unit attempting a frontal approach. But he had found something else, too. An overlooked drainage cut, choked with roots and moss, which lay entirely outside the enemy's vibration pathways. A corridor of silence. A way in. Returning to the battalion lines was risky. Patrols moved unpredictably, and the forest canopy funneled sound in unpredictable directions. The sniper chose a winding route, belly crawling through tangled brush, stopping every time the nettles quivered inside his pack. Those small tremors warned him of enemy patrols long before he heard or saw them. When he finally reached friendly lines, the maps team had already given up on gathering new intelligence. They assumed no scout could survive long enough to bring back anything useful. But the sniper laid his crude diagrams on the table, each line drawn in graphite smudged with dirt and sweat. Officers leaned in, at first confused, then stunned. He explained each vibration signature, each weapon arc, each dead zone. Skepticism remained, until artillery spotters confirmed a pattern of gunfire consistent with his markings. The ridge had indeed become a resonant chamber, and he had read it like a book. Within the hour, the battalion commander ordered an entirely new plan based on the sniper's findings. It would exploit the silent corridor he had discovered. Darkness returned by the time the battalion moved out. Infantry squads advanced in disciplined silence, slipping through the drainage cut the sniper had identified. The air smelled of wet roots and cold stone. Every soldier knew the slightest mistake could trigger a storm of machine gun fire. But the corridor remained quiet, just as mapped. The sniper led from the middle of the formation, fork strapped to his pack. Even here, vibrations whispered through the earth like distant echoes. He monitored them constantly, fingers lightly touching the fork's metal to feel for danger. None came. The kill zone's lethal funnel lay only a few dozen yards away, but the silence around them was absolute. As they climbed the western face of the ridge, the sniper felt the first deep tremor from the mortar tube. But instead of panic, he smiled. The weapon was firing in the wrong direction, covering the false approach route. It meant the enemy had no idea anyone was coming through the silent corridor. The plan was working. The battalion split into two assault teams at the top of the ridge. One would swing left to isolate the machine gun nests. The other would advance along the crest to seize the mortar pit. The sniper moved with the second group, navigating by memory and by the faint vibrations still rising through the earth. They found the mortar position half hidden behind a wall of stacked rocks. The crew was preparing another test round, unaware of the silent infantry approaching from behind. The assault was swift, precise, and silent, finished before the crew could turn their heads. The mortar tube fell into American hands without a single shot fired. Meanwhile, the first assault team engaged the nearest machine gun nest. Because the battalion had avoided the funnel entirely, the enemy had no overlapping arcs ready to support the position. Each nest, isolated from its partners, fell one by one in a cascading collapse of the entire kill zone defense. The ridge was unraveling. The sniper repositioned near a rock shelf to confirm the rest of the layout. Even without the fork planted, he could feel the subtle difference in the ground beneath him. The ridge was quieter now. Chaos replaced rhythm. Gunfire erupted as squads advanced from angles the defenders had never anticipated. He used his diagrams to guide squads toward the remaining blind spots. One path led through a fallen log choke point that provided full cover from two machine guns, but opened a perfect flank into a third. Another path bypassed a trench line entirely, allowing infantry to take it from the rear. Every move, every decision, was anchored in the invisible map drawn hours earlier under moonlight. By mid-afternoon, the sniper spotted dust rising from the eastern slope. Enemy units withdrawing in disarray. Their kill zone, engineered with such deadly intent, had been dismantled from its weakest seam. And that seam had been discovered not by scouts or artillery, but by a fork and a handful of nettles. As the battalion secured the ridge, soldiers found evidence of the enemy's confidence. Ammo crates piled neatly, range stakes hammered into the ground, fire plans drawn with meticulous care. It was meant to be a perfect slaughterhouse. Many wondered aloud how the sniper had discovered its flaws. He demonstrated the fork-and-nettle trick for a few curious NCOs. Planting the fork into the soft earth, he wrapped fresh nettles around the shaft and let the vibrations speak for themselves. The twitching fibers reacted instantly to distant footfalls. The soldiers watched in astonishment. The method looked absurd, even childish, but it worked. Word spread quickly. The battalion intelligence officer asked the sniper to write a short explanation for the after-action report. He did so reluctantly, knowing few would believe it. But the success of the operation was undeniable, and the method became a short-lived field curiosity, mentioned in passing, rarely repeated, and nearly forgotten after the war. When night fell again, the ridge was quiet at last. The sniper sat alone near the captured mortar pit, looking over the terrain he had mapped without ever seeing it. Moonlight spilled across the forest floor, illuminating the silent corridor with a pale, ghostly glow. He thought about the vibrations, the language of the earth beneath him. It had spoken in pulses, arcs, and tremors. It had described danger without sound, shapes without outlines, movement without sight. The ridge had whispered its secrets, and he had listened. It was a strange, almost intimate bond between soldier and landscape. He wondered if anyone else would ever use such a technique again. Probably not. It required patience, silence, intuition, and an unusual willingness to trust something as fragile as nettles. But in that moment, under that sky, he knew it had made all the difference. As engineers moved in to secure the ridge, they examined the terrain with professional scrutiny. They confirmed the exact pattern of firing lanes and discovered evidence supporting nearly every detail of the sniper's diagrams. What had seemed like a wild improvisation was now recognized as a genuine intelligence breakthrough. The battalion commander privately commended him, acknowledging that hundreds of lives had likely been saved. He asked one question: how did the sniper think of such a method? The sniper simply replied that the Earth always talks. Most men just never learn to hear it. The commander, though skeptical, wrote the words into his notebook. In the following days, the sniper continued assisting with reconnaissance around the sector. But nothing ever resembled the ridge. No other ground resonated with such clarity. No other terrain whispered so loudly. The fork-and-nettle technique remained unique to that moment in the war. Weeks later, as the battalion prepared to push deeper toward the next defensive line, the sniper found himself once again at the edge of a forest, studying a new landscape. But this time, the vibrations were muffled, irregular, chaotic. The ground was too dry, too fractured by artillery. There was no resonant chamber here. Still, the memory of the ridge stayed with him. The idea that the Earth could be read, could be felt like a living thing, never left his mind. He kept the fork tucked in his pack, not knowing if he'd ever use it again. It was a reminder of a night when improvisation outweighed firepower and instinct replaced sight. Other soldiers joked about the vibration reader, but the tone was different now, respectful, curious. They knew the ridge could have been their grave. They knew a simple trick had saved them from walking into a perfect kill zone. On the final day before the battalion left the area for good, the sniper climbed once more to the top of the ridge. He stood at the edge of the silent corridor, looking down the slope where soldiers had passed safely under the cover of darkness. He planted the fork one last time, almost ceremonially, and felt nothing. The ridge was dormant now, its voice spent, its secrets already taken. He removed the nettles from his pack and let them fall to the ground. Their wilted strands fluttered in the breeze, no longer sharp or reactive. For a brief moment, he imagined them twitching again, mapping danger, revealing unseen lines. But the war had moved on, and so would he. As the battalion marched out, the sniper glanced back once. The ridge stood quiet, unaware of its role in the strange, silent battle that had unfolded upon it. The kill zone had been defeated not by firepower or brute strength, but by a whisper in the soil, and a soldier willing to listen. And somewhere inside his pack, the fork lay still, an unlikely instrument that had once mapped death itself.